We're going to kick it off. The first topic this week is practice design. I've got a couple of housekeeping items to go over. First of all, we are recording. We're going to be sharing this with other coaches if they can't make it, as well as publishing at least some parts of this as a podcast and some of our other content. So keep that in mind as you're talking about stuff. We can always say, hey, we're going to stop recording and have a more of a, individualized discussion relevant to you if you want to make that, not public facing. I'm always happy to do that kind of at the end. And then your first task is if you want to take advantage of the free clinic offer, we're trying to get connected with more rec coordinators, and it's always easier if we have a parent or a coach in the program. And part of your bonus package that we rolled into doing the course is for us to come and do a series of clinics with your rec, your town, or your school, and just get more coaches, better ideas about coaching. Also, do we like to do a workshop with parents to kind of get them on board with our unique ideas if you're going to take that route and run with it. And then also to do a player clinic and kind of give you a hands-on chance to implement some of our ideas with me there to kind of coach the coach and kind of just make all that tie together. So if you can connect us, I just recommend doing a CC email like, hey, rec coordinator, just met BJ. I'm doing a coaching course. We want to get a clinic on the calendar this fall, and we can get the conversation started. And then your homework this week, I want you to write down two things for me and just email it to me. It's bj@playpracticebasketball.com. First one is, what do you hope to get out of this course? So I have a framework basically is always my approach of what I want to cover, but I really like to navigate and customize that to, address questions and kind of what you guys are looking for as much as possible. And then second is what problem do you need to solve? Whether it's a new problem, like Mike has coached with the rec and travel and is now entering the middle school, a little higher level competition, or you're just starting coaching the first time, or maybe last season with the same team or the same age group, and you know what the problems are and you're looking for solutions. So two writer downers, if you can send me, just give me a sentence. What do you hope to get out of it? What problem do you need to solve this year? That would be great. Just help me give you guys a better experience as we're going through this. So, first off, I like to use models whenever possible, sketches of my ideas. This is kind of a major one we're going to be coming back to several of our different week modules. And it took me a while to kind of figure out how to visualize this, but this is how I see everyone else teaching basketball. They're starting with skills at the bottom, right? We do the most volume of work on skills, but they're kind of isolated from offense or defense reaction, and they're isolated even from other players and teammates most of the time. And then we tend to do tactics, right? Here's how to pass and cut. We connect that to the skills. And then the very last, we do decisions, and the least amount of time is spent on that. And we hope that playing games, all these pieces are going to connect and, leave players knowing how to play basketball. And really over time of really experimenting and thinking about this, especially across our younger age groups, what I've arrived at is we need to help players learn basketball instead of teaching it to them, right? What's the best experience to help them actually learn and progress? And so what I've laid it out is we need more decisions. We need volume of repetition on the decision side. And a lot of that comes from needing to be in a game situation. Like we got to create the environment where the decision is going to happen. And then we can kind of make this a funnel instead of a pyramid. It's like a lot of decisions, a few tactics that go with those decisions, and a very few skills that actually fit the situation we've created that they need to execute. And then that stack in the player's mind just creates like infinite motivation to work on stuff, right? Because the reverse, the pyramid here is like we're doing these skills. We don't know why. Coach told us to pound the ball in the garage, but I don't really feel motivated to do that. I don't see where it connects to the game. Like I don't really want to, right? And over here, it's like, hey, we're working on the decision to shoot or drive out of a ball screen. And here's how the situation sets up. And here's the ball handling skill that actually solves that problem. And then they're like, wow, two chairs and garbage can in the driveway. And like, I can go to town ball handling because I connect all this context to what I'm actually doing. And so this is kind of a meta framework I try to review myself every once in a while. Like, is my practice design following this step by step progression? Or am I going, here's a skill out of context that I want you to work on because I said so. Like as soon as I see myself veering into that, I was like, all right, let's pull it back and like, what is the situation? What's the problem we're solving? What's the skill we need? And then just get incredibly good results from players being motivated to do really whatever we're working on because we're giving them all of that stack of context behind it. So any I guess any questions about that first off? Does that make sense to you guys? Cool. You can unmute if you got a question anytime. I'm happy to pause and go deeper on anything that catches your attention. So, what we're going to cover this week, the play practice play model. Why I named my business play practice actually originated from a book by an Australian guy named Alan Launder, just called Play Practice. But if you're familiar with the whole part whole kind of teaching progression, I really have arrived at like play practice play is like the best recipe I could have to really get players engaged, give them that context we are just talking about, and have the ability to break down and fix and solve some of the detailed work they need to do on the skill side. So kind of meta, what we're going to talk about as a practice design is like I'm going to start with live play and end with live play, kind of eliminate the boring stretching warm-up stuff that most of our third to eighth graders don't really need physically. They're pretty limber and can get into action pretty quick. It's like going for engagement and heart rate variability as our baseline instead of having a really slow warm-up that loses some players even to start practice. Second, we're going to talk about problems before solutions. So, again, going back to play first, allow the players to go right into a game and experience a problem that maybe you know exactly what's going to arrive as the problem that we need to solve. But if you let them experience it first, they're a lot more open to the solution. And then we're going to talk about prioritizing practice. Just simple like 80-20 framework. What happens the most often in the game that if we get good at that, nothing else will matter. Compared to where a lot of our really excited coaching brain goes is like this really cool play for out of bounds. We're going to spend 45 minutes on out of our hour of practice this week, but we might only use it twice this season, right? And like we can veer off and end up spending way too much time of our very limited time in practice on stuff that's not going to happen very frequently and it's not going to have that big of impact. And then number four is just design using constraints. So anybody ever heard of the constraints-led approach? CLA is a common acronym out there in the world now. You guys familiar with that at all? No. Cool. Well, it's definitely not mine. It's been out there for a while. One of my longtime mentors, Noah LaRoche, was one of the originators of that. But it's kind of blown up, especially international basketball. CLA is like a buzzword almost out there of constraint-led approach to designing practice. So we're going to give you an intro to that. So, play, practice, play. Players come to practice for only three reasons, right? They want to play the game, they want to have fun, or they want to improve their skill. Most players would probably say all three of those, right? And by improving their skill, they want to be able to play more, play better, hopefully have more fun by being more skilled. And so, if we just focus our attention on that as coaches, we tend to have a lot higher engagement, a lot higher retention as our players age. They're not getting either bored or overwhelmed. They're being engaged and excited and having fun and kind of getting what they're there for, right? As opposed to showing up and getting a soapbox speech and getting yelled at and running suicides. Like, or we lose girls even most likely. We see fifth, sixth grade age girls like we don't even have enough for a team this year because they've had a bad experience in the past and they won't come back. It's like not engaging enough to keep them. So we're trying to avoid being boring, being stationary, being irrelevant with drills that are not related to the game, where the player like I can't make a connection from the game I know to what we're doing in this drill and therefore why, right? And then listening to coach talks. We're going to talk about next week simplifying instructions, trying to make your instructions really short, concise, and powerful so that your time talking is very limited and therefore their time doing is greatly increased. And then three is just standing in line, whatever drill or offense or whatever you're doing, making sure that it's like 30 seconds or less that they're waiting in line so that they stay engaged and stay maximizing their repetitions instead of, poking their buddy in the ribs and like messing around. All the stuff that frustrates us as coaches, in my mind, is usually caused by poor practice design that leads to players standing in line for 2, 3 minutes, and we just lose them very quickly. Any questions on that so far? Cool. Anybody have an experience to share where you've lost players either in the micro of a practice or in the meta, like over a season? Okay, I'm gonna take silence as a no. All right, problem before solution. It's one of my favorite sayings. A learner who is shown a solution without experience the problem will never value the solution enough to thoroughly understand and apply it on their own, right? And so this is like notorious, what coaches are notorious for is like, we have all this basketball knowledge, we know what the solution is, but the player doesn't even know the problem yet, right? And so we're like, hey, here's this really great move and technique and skill and like everything I know about it. I'm really excited about it. And they're like, but why though? Right? Like, so really the play practice play approach leads us to throw them into the fire with a game where you know you can force them into the problem so that they definitely experience the problem, and then pause for 5 minutes and say, hey, where you just ran into that guy and lost the ball, here's a way to change direction and go finish somewhere else in the paint. And now this is a solution to a problem they just experienced, and they're like, wow, this is like the best thing ever. And I'm going to go work on it all weekend, and next week I come back, I have this solution to a problem and it really works and I know where to use it. So it's again kind of connecting multiple layers of context around the game situation, experience the problem, and then you're like a hero delivering solutions on a silver platter all the time that they just realized they needed, instead of you giving them this menu of solutions that they don't know where they need it or they don't know where it fits, and they're less likely to really adopt it, understand it, or again be motivated to go work on it. So who's familiar with the whole part whole method? You guys familiar with that concept? Just a pedagogy is the official teachy word, but just a way to present any information or any subject that you're trying to help someone learn. It's like you give them the whole big picture, you break down the parts, and you build it back to the whole, right? You guys familiar with that at all? No? Chris Lively's giving me a thumbs up a little bit. And it's a fairly common term out there, but great approach to coaching because again, most of us just we go parts, 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 scrimmage, right? It's like skill, 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 scrimmage, and we don't do a good job of connecting the two. And so again, play the game, whether that's pieces of the game or the whole 5-on-5 game, play the whole thing, break down a couple of parts, but connect it back to the whole, most importantly, so that they know where that fits, right? And so I like to talk about is the situational context and then the decisions and then the skills, kind of like the funnel model I showed you a few minutes ago. I don't have tactics in here, but that would be maybe a fourth step. Situational context. We know where this fits in the game. We know the decisions we're going to have to make. We know maybe the tactics of how I interact with a teammate, and then we know the skills. And we're going to get deeper into that in the coming weeks. And then the third criteria for this is make sure we're identifying real world problems to ensure we work on real world solutions. So again, just connecting it to what the player knows is going to happen in a game. It's one of the most powerful things you can do to get them engaged and motivated and ready to work on what you want them to work on. And so this kind of brings up the thought for me where I see a lot of coaches creating like artificial adversity, right? And it's a basketball, it's a sports culturally, even more generally, concept that we need adversity in order to get comfortable with adversity, in order to get better and be able to succeed kind of in any situation, right? But what I really see coaches again veering off the path with is spending time creating artificial adversity, right? We're going to create this crazy circus drill that is really complicated and really messy and really chaotic and really frustrating probably for players and coaches, and we're trying to make it harder on the player, which is a good thought at its core, but we're kind of veering off what actually happens in a game, which is plenty complicated and plenty difficult to solve if we can just narrow the player's focus into a very specific situation and solve a very specific problem and lead them down that path again of decision, tactic, and skill that is then relevant for them when they get in a game and they see what I come to call snapshots. They see a snapshot of a game situation that they've been in before, and it's like the greatest thing ever. It's like, oh, I'm here, he's there, ball screen, I know what to do. And they're able to go execute it and solve that real world problem. So, making sure we are working on real problems and not creating artificial either drills or artificial adversity to make it hard on them just for the sake of making it hard instead of working on something that they're actually going to need to solve. All right. Any questions on that so far? Cool. We're going to talk about prioritizing practice. So, back to real world problems. What happens the most frequently in a game, right? So, like, I've spent a lot of my career working with individual players, doing one on one training, as well as coaching teams. And so I try to look at both sides of this, like individually, what happens the most often, as a team, what happens the most often. But the individual is a little bit simpler to go through. So I decided to stick with this kind of our framework. So on offense, what happens a lot is you catch a pass, right? We're throwing multiple passes, maybe up to 10 to 12 passes in a possession sometimes before we take a shot, depending on the pace of play, the skill level, whether we have a shot clock or not. And so being able to make good decisions and be able to execute a couple of skills that go with catching a pass, right? And it might be for our very lowest age level beginners, it's like just how do you catch a pass, right? How can I move my feet toward the ball? How can I get my hands around the ball? How can I get my grip so that I could take a shot after catching that pass? Like all those skills can go around that. But it's kind of like, if you're with a third grade team, if none of your players can catch passes, it's like nothing else matters, right? It's like this happens so often that like if we're dropping every pass that gets thrown to us, it's like we don't even need to work about, team offense and team defense. It's like we got to be able to catch a pass and make that happen, right? And second would be you throw a pass, which probably nearly as equal to catching a pass as like if I get the ball in my hands, maybe I just caught a pass, but now I'm going to throw a pass. I'm like, can I throw an accurate pass? Can I throw it in the air? Can I throw it as a bounce? Can I throw it over top a defender? Right? Can I lead someone that's moving as a teammate and get it to them ahead of them where they can catch it? Like all those pieces start to build into that. And then you take a shot, right? Whether that's a layup near the basket, it's a jump shot on the catch, depending on the age and skill level, it's going to be a lot of different variety of shots. But what happens before you take a shot? What happens after you take a shot? Like that kind of gives us a framework already of like a lot of the skills we need to work on. And then you drive to the basket, right? And that could be I did a dribble ball handling move before I drove to the basket, or again, I just caught a pass and then drove to the basket. So what happens before I drive? And then as I'm driving, what happens after? Am I finishing at the rim? Am I kicking out to a teammate? Am I rebounding because I passed it and someone else shot it? Right. So trying to get a simple framework just based around what happens most frequently in a game. And then you can very easily flip this to the defensive side and look at, if I'm guarding someone that just caught a pass, how do I react before and after? If my opponent who has the ball throws a pass and I'm on defense, how do I guard them after they throw a pass? How do I guard them before they take a shot? How do I guard them after they take a shot? How do I defend on a drive before they get into it? And how do I stop and end that drive? And how do I react afterwards? So just kind of walking through some simple situations like that, even on an individual basis like this, can be incredibly powerful to just guide your practice. And, if I think about a progression from third grade all the way up to high school, it's not going to be a lot different. You might go faster, you might go more in depth, but it's going to be a similar set of skills and situations that they really need to get good at, right? Basketball is played only in a few different situations. And if you can break those down to simple pieces like this, then you kind of have the whole universe of skills you need to work on. And then it's just a matter of prioritizing, based on this eighth grade team, like, all right, we're pretty good at passing, we're pretty good at shooting, we're okay at driving, but what we really have trouble with is people moving around a drive, right? Creating space for the team, creating space to get open to shoot when we don't have the ball in our own hands. And, then that can build your whole skill progression for a season, even with your team. Like, this is what we need to get better at and prioritize it that way. Um, so any thoughts on that one? I'd love to get you guys jumping in here with at least a comment or a question at this point if you got one. No, everybody good? No comments. Okay, I'm gonna keep rolling. Mike's driving. Hopefully he's paying attention to the road. I'm gonna
I
distract.
am.
All right. So, more depth on designing practice. This is one of my favorite concepts. I call it a channel of attention. So, our goal as practice designers is to use situational constraints to create repeatable channels of attention. So, what does that mean? What that really looks like is a situational constraint. I've boiled down to be one of three things. It's going to be a limitation on how much space the players are working in, how many options you're giving them that are valid to like score a point or win the game, and how much time they have, right? And so these are like my favorite levers and knobs and dials. Like I'm just tweaking these all the time. And there's like some drills or games that I'll create and like this is like standard. We're gonna do this much space and this much time, and you have this option. But it's also like almost unlimited ways that you can tweak each of those depending on what you're going for. And so back to the funnel idea of decisions, really what we're trying to get out of this is constrain the game so that the players arrive at the same decision point a lot, right? And they get repetitions of decisions by getting funneled into that same situation, same positioning, hopefully with offense and defense. And then it just becomes like problem solving, right? It's like we don't have to tell them what to do. It's like you only have one dribble. And so they're like, all right, one dribble, I can get to the rim maybe sometimes. I can drive hard and Euro step when I pick up my dribble and get a different angle. I could shoot a dribble pull up. I could shoot a floater. I could shoot a step back. Like they'll come up with all their own solutions to the problem you give them if you can just get the constraints where you want them to be so that they arrive at the decision point, right? And this is way better than getting them to do a repetition of a skill because the decision is what happens most frequently, right? And so something like catching a pass we just talked about is probably the most frequent thing that happens in a game across all players. We catch a pass. And so we work a lot in our training on the decision. Do you shoot or do you drive? Right? Catch a pass, shoot it or drive it. Can you make that decision quickly enough? Can you make it consistently that you're making the shot when you take the correct decision? And can you destroy your defender with one or maybe two dribbles if you drive it by making the correct decision? And that's just like biggest confidence builder kind of in the whole realm of basketball that I've experienced is like getting really, really good at the decision then allows the skill to be fairly easy, right? So again, back to the pyramid model, if we get good at the decision and we destroy our defender because they overplayed our shot, then the drive was pretty obvious. And now it's like finishing a layup with nobody there because we destroyed our defender is a pretty easy skill to work on and get good at, right? Whereas if we got really good at the skill of finishing a layup, without getting good at the decision, we might never actually get there, right? We might take too long or make the wrong decision most of the time. And so we never actually get to go finish that layup that maybe we're really good at, the technical skill of finishing a layup, right? And so by just tweaking the knobs and dials here, we're able to constrain and funnel them toward a specific situational decision and then when they get good at that decision, the skills can kind of trickle downstream from that. So I like to call it skills downstream from decisions rather than building the skill pyramid we talked about with a lot of skill repetition at the bottom, not connected to anything. We're trying to get the decision to work and funnel that down to execution of the skill. Um, so I've spent some time thinking about like what other possible constraints could we use, and there's some avenues around these, but I kind of think of these as like the big umbrella. If you work on these three as being like your main tools, you can kind of use them either individually in isolation or together to really create whatever you want the player to end up with as a situational constraint. Any questions on that one? Cool. We are rolling right through it. So let's talk about what a channel of attention looks like. This is a term I came up with a couple years ago that I really like and have stuck with. So if you think of the constraints leading the player into a scenario that's repeatable, that should probably include a specific spot on the court, right? So we're working from a certain angle or we're putting them into a certain position or angle, specific body position, and then a specific angle of movement relative to their defense, their opponent, and the basket. And so, kind of like I just talked about again, if you're allowing the player to arrive at the same decision point over and over again, it allows them to get good at that and removes the chaos and the distractions of a full 5-on-5 competition, right? So like if you think about if we scrimmage, it's probably the most opposite end of the spectrum of what I just talked about. We play 5-on-5 scrimmage. There is so much variability in what goes on. If we want a player to get good at a decision that happens, it might only happen once, even in a full game, right? Where they were cutting a certain way, they got to a certain spot, they received a pass with a defender coming at them, and they had the chance to shoot or drive, right? And that specific scenario might only happen once in a blue moon in a game. And so trying to just isolate that. And what we call it with our youngest age group is learning basketball in pieces, where we hardly ever play 5-on-5. We're showing them maybe a 3-on-3 game scenario to get them some context. And then we're playing a lot of 1-on-1, where it's like, yeah, in this game, he cut to basket, you cut toward the ball and caught it, and now you got shot or drive. And like we're just playing 1-on-1 from that fill cut, shot or drive option and getting them really good at it. And then what we end up with is like a lot of these puzzle pieces that they've gotten good at, the decision and the skill that goes with the decision, and we start putting them together. So like now it's a teammate. We pass and cut and fill, and we can play pretty good 2-on-2 or even 3-on-3 by having gotten good at these individual pieces, stacking them up. So the channel of attention term I like to use, I don't really use with the players very much, but how I think about it is like I am choosing, like, if you think about like changing channels on your television, like I'm choosing channel one. We are trying to get you better at this shot versus drive decision. And then maybe the next 10 minutes of practice, we're going to change channels. Now we're trying to get good at the decision of finish or change direction in the paint. And we can play that channel, but we're driving the player down this straight and narrow path so that they get good at the repetition of decisions again. That making sense to you guys? Okay, good. So, practically, this means creating your own small-sided games. You guys familiar with that term? SSG or small-sided games really just means anything less than 5-on-5. It's probably an older term than the CLA constraint-led approach, but SSG's common acronym nowadays you'll see out there in the world. Um, so this is kind of how I would approach creating my own small-sided games, which, there's some that are just good enough that I keep all the time. And then there's always like this week, I'm working on a couple new flavors of this certain situation in order to get, again, the channel of attention I want the player on to get a certain decision made. So really it comes from a problem approach, like what is the problem, right? Identify where are we struggling right now. And maybe for your team, it's like cutting at the right time so that we're not in each other's way and we're not clogging up space, right? Like cutting at the right time is a problem. And so, how can we create a situational game and demonstrate it to allow the players to experience the problem, right? So, like one of my favorites right now is play 3-on-3 with no dribble. We can only score by shooting a catch or cutting and catching a pass while we're cutting, right? And like instantly puts them in a channel of attention. Like, I can't dribble. That's like my favorite skill as a sixth grade boy. The only way I know how to play basketball is dribbling. So what do I do if there's no dribble? I gotta get good at cutting. I gotta get good at leading my cutter with a pass. I gotta get good at spacing and moving so there is room to operate when my teammate catches a pass in the paint. And so you can just take whatever problem you have and start to break it down. Look at, all right, are we constraining space, right? Are we constraining options? Are we constraining time? And again, you can combine those and layer them. So, like the category I'd put the game I just described, if we're playing 3-on-3 with no dribble, I would say that is a constraint of options because I don't have the option to dribble. I have only the option to move without the ball and create angles and advantages with passing and with cutting. Um, and then you can break that down, as needed. So maybe it's like we're really struggling to catch a pass and finish on a cut. So now we can break it down further and like, okay, we need to catch on our inside foot. And then we get 2 steps into our layup. And so like we need breakdown reps, maybe 5 minutes of like everybody line up. We're going catch on right foot, left, right, finish left-handed. We're going catch on left foot, right, left, finish right-handed. And for a lot of players, they probably never thought about what their feet do before they catch a pass in order to set up what a layup should actually look like. And so breaking that down and showing it to them again as a solution to the problem, and then getting back to the game of 3-on-3 no dribble, suddenly they're like, I know how to do this. When I catch on this foot, this hand works, and I get my finishing to work. And so this is really just an example of how I would approach building a constraint-led, small-sided game to solve a specific problem that we're struggling with. And so often my approach was when I was coaching teams is I would just take notes during games, sometimes during practices, but like, hey, we're struggling to catch and finish on a cut and just write down that problem. Like give my brain some time to think about it. And then when I'm preparing for the next practice, it's like, okay, let's play no dribble so we can show them the problem in isolation. Because again, when it's in a full 5-on-5 normal scrimmage, those examples are lost to the player, right? You might see them and pick it out and yell at them, but they just experienced 15 different problems in the last 5 minutes. They're not going to really engage with that. It's like play 3-on-3 no dribble. We're isolating the problem that we want them to see before we show them the solution again. And then you can stack that up like I have here, test it in one-on-one. So maybe we're just going to play one-on-one cutting. And maybe even I'm the coach as the passer so that we don't have to worry about the variability of whatever sixth grader is throwing the pass to the cutter. If the cutter does their job, I want to be able to make sure I can get them the pass. And so we might start with one-on-one. Then we might play 2-on-2 to do a simpler version and build back to 3-on-3 and continue up to 5-on-5 as necessary. But as soon as we stack those, showing them the problem, isolating and fixing, giving them a solution, and then competing with that solution, like that is the best retention of skill acquisition that I have ever found. And really just putting them into those different channels of attention at will allows you to maybe solve 5 or 6 problems in a practice of an hour and a half because you're like, this 10 minutes, this is the channel of attention I want. Here's a game, here's a solution, fixed it. Here we go on to the next one. We can move really, really fast by isolating and solving problems really specifically. All right, kind of summarizing here. I have a little example I'll walk through, but summarizing what I just talked about, using live play to start and end practice. So I could expand on that a little bit. I like to go 10-minute game to start practice, just right off the bat, no warm up, nothing. It'll be the best time for your players, and it'll also be your best tool as coaches to never have a player walk in late again. They will be on mom or dad to get out the door and get to practice because they know they're going to get game time when they walk in the door. And if they're the seventh man on the team, they might not play the first couple minutes if we're playing 3-on-3, right? So they want to be there first to be in the game. And so one of my favorite things to do. And then I like to use that as like an observation period for coaches. Is like we're just throwing them in the game. We're not really coaching the game. We're letting them play live with maybe a constraint or two based on what we're working on, but they're just playing and we get to watch. And like, hey, last week we were working on this catch and finish with no dribble in the paint. Is anybody able to do that still? Like, do we need to go review that today, or is that skill good and I'm noticing a different problem? So observation period is great. And then I always like to circle back and end practice with a game so that they get to again apply some of the pieces we worked on in live competition. So you can think about that on both I guess a meta scale, like over a whole practice. I want to have the sine wave of we're playing, we're breaking down, we're playing again, right? So the middle of the practice might be the slowest part where we're doing the most teaching, or they're doing the most learning, hopefully. But then also within each 10-minute segment, I want to think about that. Like we play one on one, we break it down because they're struggling with the finishing, and then we play again. And if you can do that in a 10 or 15-minute segment inside of the bigger practice flow, then players start to really get a great amount of variety and their engagement goes up. It's like this 10 minutes, we're doing this channel of attention, got that skill. Next, we're doing this, finishing in the paint against a live defender, got that. Now we're playing 3-on-3 with no dribble, and they're just like loving it. They're fast paced, they're leaning forward, they're engaged. And, hopefully as coaches, you're having a good time too, keeping it moving fast. All right, next piece, just summarizing again, we allow players to experience the problem before the solution, prioritizing what happens most frequently, and then designing your practice to try to use constraints to channel their attention. And really think about it as, it can be pretty drastic switches, but change channels, like boom, water break, here we go. This is a whole different channel, different game, different focus. So the framework I like to use, because most rec teams at least tend to have an hour of practice, maybe two per week, but on average, I would say most towns I talk to is like we got a 1 hour practice and Saturday is 1 hour game, or maybe a combo on Saturday. And so I've tried to adapt kind of what I would do in an hour. So this kind of example practice plan. So 10 minutes, I would play full court if possible, maybe with a constraint, 2 dribbles per player per touch, right? You could change that limitation every week, be something different every practice, just to give them a different flavor of the game. But we're not doing much coaching outside of enforcing that constraint. It's just live play. You get to observe what they're doing. 5 minutes, break down how to change speed and direction on a cut to get open, right? So that's a problem I'm noticing. We're going constant speed, and so our defender is predicting where we're going to be and either meeting us there, or deflecting the pass, or not getting open. We could play 2-on-2 half court. So this would be like a 15-minute or a 10-minute breakdown and play again. We notice a problem. We work on changing speed and direction on cuts, and then we play half court with a shot clock starting from a pass and cut. So we're using the limitation of time and trying to just get repetitions. Can I cut and move, changing direction to get open? Make that work. And then we could go to play one-on-one from a closeout. So we're now working on that classic shot or drive decision. It's only one-on-one, so I don't even have the option to pass. Kind of simplify it. And then based on how we're doing with that, we can break down catch and shoot footwork, maybe shooting technique. Definitely catch and drive footwork comes up a lot, even with our high school players, like how to go from a catch to a drive without traveling by maximizing your space and limiting the number of steps, number of dribbles you need to get all the way to the rim. And then this one I have play closeout again. So a lot of times we'll just play the same game. Like we play this and it's like, wow, that was really god awful. Everybody's struggling. Let's break it down, fix a couple things, and let's play again so that they get kind of a better experience with the solution they just worked on. And they're like, oh, yeah, this works. Like I just beat Johnny 3 times by shooting it faster right on the catch with this footwork we just practiced. Like that's sticking. I'm going to keep using that. Then I usually do 10 minutes of breaking down our 3-on-0 offense. So this is kind of more meta over the practice. We did this full court game. We noticed some problems. This would be the breakdown for that later on in the practice, working on some piece of our offense we're going to get into in week 3. We're going to go over kind of my favorite offensive frameworks. And then last 15 minutes, play again, right? I'm playing half court game this time, gives you a little bit more control, and we're going to isolate the skill of passing and cutting, right? Starting from a specific situation that probably showed up in our game, or we just had planned as something from a previous practice or game we noticed that we were trying to really focus our attention on for this whole practice. So I call it 6 things in 60 minutes. You can kind of break that out however you want. Sometimes it's 4 things. You might do 15-minute segments, especially with a younger age group. Less things, a little bit more time on each thing can be good. But I think about this like fifth, sixth grade, seventh, eighth grade, like 6 things in 60 minutes is just a really good pace to get a lot done. And again, get multiple channels of attention where they're getting good at specific things and still getting a chance to compete within that. All right. Coming up in module two, I can talk about in a minute, but I'd like to kind of veer toward Q&A now. We got 15 minutes left. Tell me questions you guys have based on all I just ran through.
Uh, BJ, I was just wondering, in my age group, each year I'm going to start the season with, anywhere from 4 to 5 players that this is their first introduction to the sport and playing. When
Yeah.
you're looking at this type of practice model, how do you like to kind of fit those players in?
Yeah, it's a great question. So if I can just reframe that. So it's how to balance addressing a beginner that's in a group of more experienced players. Is that right? Or
Yeah,
multiple of them, right?
most of my players are fairly inexperienced, but yeah, that brand new player that's
Yeah,
like diving right in.
right. So I guess let me turn it back to you with a question. How have you approached that in the past?
Um, well, usually when the season starts, we get 3 practices if we're lucky before we're driven into a game. So we've found ourselves to, we really try to, almost like you said, not to, like we do a lot of like work for maybe the first practice, and then the next two are kind of diving into, okay, this is really gameplay and how we're going to get into it. But
Yeah.
we really find that we lose those new players because it's too fast for them.
Yeah. No, I think that's kind of matches my experience as well. And so I guess the younger the age group you have, the more time you should spend on skills. Kind of like I was talking about with finishing a layup, right? It's like the decision part can be important, but it's like I guess I was using this more with the with catching a pass, but it's like the youngest age group is like until we can catch a pass, it's like nothing else matters. Like a lot of coaches go off the rails with that. It's like here's this great YouTube offense I found. We're gonna do this, this, and this, and it's like, well, Johnny can't catch a pass. Like we were 2 seconds into it, and then you dropped the ball out of bounds, and like we kind of got to fix that first. And so I guess I've come to think about it like when I'm doing the rec coaches training, I often talk about like percentage of team aspect versus individual skill and like how you calibrate that. So like at the youngest level, I would pretty much call it 80-20. Like we need 80% of our practice time on skill stuff and just 20% on a couple of rules to coordinate us as a team, make sure we're staying out of each other's way, right? And we're going to talk about more of that stuff. But the other aspect I like to think about is really came from a mentor of mine was trying to move at the pace of the best player so that the youngest players are not going to get it this week. They might not get it this season. But if you go at the pace of the best player is engaged and getting better all the time, and everyone else is getting pulled along, right? And then, with that, you can also put like I call it handicaps, right? Put a handicap on your best player to make their job harder in this one-on-one drill against, Johnny the beginner that can't walk and dribble yet. And this guy that's a fifth grade baller, it's like, hey, fifth grade baller, you got one dribble. Johnny, you got unlimited dribbles. And now we're more equal to play one-on-one, and he's got to get better at more specific things as a better player. But I guess more big picture back to your question. I would really try to go like 80% of our practice time, at least for those three first practices, needs to be skill building. Like, can we all dribble and make layups at the youngest age group? And then, what can we build out of that over time? But even as you get into the season, is like that ratio might change a little bit, maybe 60-40, but it still should be weighted toward the skill side because it's kind of like, nothing else matters until we can dribble and catch passes and make layups at a fundamental level, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Yeah. That's great.
Cool. What else we got? Mike, what's on your mind?
I think the 3v3 and those types of things when you do constraints, I've found the most success with is, you got the one guy that can dribble around everybody in the on the team. So
Hmm.
you take that away and you kind of even the playing field for, I mean, that's been my experience with some of these kids. You got
Yeah.
the other kids who want to just shoot 3 pointers. You
Mm.
take that away from them, forces them to go to the basket. You get you take away some of their strengths to help the ones that have weaknesses in it, and it makes the whole team better quickly.
Yeah.
Um, and that's where I found the most improvement with teams is, you know, obviously Johnny's bringing the ball up the floor because nobody can steal it from him, but
Mhm.
everybody else is looking to get the ball. And if you can figure out how to get the ball out of Johnny's hands and in everybody else's hands,
Yeah.
it makes you a little bit more unstoppable. And I think your breakup of practice is, one of the pieces that I'm trying to get out of this is, how to even going into the seventh, eighth grade level is you still have the kids that want to be with their friends and play that may not have are fully committed anymore to the sport, but because of the sizes of our, schools and everything else, you keep everybody on the team. So you got to keep that distraction
Hmm.
somehow off the table so it doesn't screw your whole practice up.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like I love the breakdown of six things in 60 minutes because it takes those kids and it just keeps them busy. And if they're playing with somebody that's just a distraction on top of a distraction, separate them. And that's what I like most about today is seeing how to break that down a little bit even more to make it
Yeah.
productive for everybody there, whether they're excited to play or just run up and down the court. If the kids are full of
Yeah.
energy, I think PJ, you told me that one other time is, get the kids running at the beginning of the practice. We try to settle them down at the beginning of practice, tire them out a little bit so they can pay
Right.
attention.
Yeah,
So
right. Instead of a boring stretching routine, right, where you're gonna lose some kids right
yeah,
away, it's like balls to the wall. We're playing full court 3-on-3 with a shot clock, and they're
yeah,
like gasping for breath, and then you can talk to them for a minute while they catch their breath and get a sip of water or something. Can work great. Two
yeah,
things came to mind as you were just talking there. One of my favorite kind of side effects of the constraint approach, like you're talking about the best player kind of adapting to be constrained in order to get everybody involved. Like one of my favorite things is changing that mentality of your best player to be, from Johnny's in my way. Like clearly he's unskilled, doesn't know how to play basketball very well, and I would rather he was not on the court so I could play 1-on-5 easier, right? And we changed that to suddenly, Johnny's open and now he's an asset because I don't have a dribble, right? So the only way I'm going to score is by using Johnny to pass to and cut where he can get it back to me and then I can score, right? Or whatever the case may be. Like one of my favorite games is actually playing with one dribble so that they could go drive to the rim really hard and finish it. But if they burn that dribble, they have to pass and use a teammate to get it back to do their next thing. And it just completely equalizes the players. And you start to see everybody as an asset that you can use to create an advantage, create a different angle, create a different kind of cut, and have a new scoring opportunity when otherwise, you were, out of luck. The end of the possession, you were going to have to jack up a shot. Um, and then the second thing you touched on was like when you have those different level of players, kind of connecting back to what Chris said, is one of the best things you can do is just sort them by that skill level when you play one-on-one, I guess, especially is what kind of comes to mind. It's like find parity of matchups so that these two players that are not very good are making each other better, and the best players are going against the best players and still making each other better, right? So there can be a balance to that between different drills and different stuff you're working on. Where I was talking about with Chris, constrain the best player so he has a limited number of dribbles compared to the worst player. But you could also just say, hey, Johnny and Joey, you're the best two matchups for this game. You go on that hoop and play one on one. And maybe we have a coach just for the beginners, if there's three of them, compared to the nine other players that are pretty good because they know what they're doing and can use less coaching to still get a lot done. But again, there's multiple ways to kind of tweak your knobs and levers there to find, the matchups that make sense, that tries to keep them all going forward a step, kind of thinking about what's the next step for them, not necessarily what's the step for the whole team, because they might not be moving at the same rate. They might not be ready to take the same size step forward. But yeah, really good stuff, Mike. I appreciate that. Anybody else have something? Comments or questions? No, we're good. Cool. Let me just preview what we're working on next week. We're going to talk about simplifying instructions. So there's a methodology out there in the world called Tag Teach, and I adopted this about 8 years ago. I really think about it as a communication shortcut, just a way to get more across with less words and have really good feedback loops that are tight and specific and just give a player what they need to know to take that next small step forward, kind of what we were just touching on. We're going to talk about creating a focus funnel, kind of layering your instructions so that you can get down to really specific focus point. And then the power of precision, that's kind of the end of that, is using 5 words or less for your final instruction before they try to do it. And then the reinforcement I've come to use is just yes. If you do it really consistently and you've set up all your instructions really well, then when they do it, you say yes. And if they don't do it right, at most you'll say try again. And we'll talk through kind of how all that works. And I'll try to come up with some demonstration of what that really looks like. But it's probably best to really get you a look at how that works is to get you guys in the gym at some point, or I might be able to send you a video like with me mic'd up and just exactly how we do that with some of our training groups, because it's really I'd say it's the biggest accelerator I've found for my whole coaching career, is just being better at instructions, getting faster results for a player, and getting results that stick over time by just being really rigorous with this method. So, lots of good stuff coming on that front. Any final questions as we wrap up? Anybody have an individual question or concern? I'm happy to stay on and chat a few more minutes if you got something personal you want to talk about related to what we're going through or related to anything else in general. If not, then we will wrap up there. I'll send you guys the recording probably later tonight or tomorrow morning so you can have that to review back as you wish. And please send me that email, what you want to get out of the course and what's your biggest problem you're trying to solve. And we'll tackle that next week.
Thank you.
All right, guys.
Thanks, BJ.
BJ.
You're very welcome. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.
You too.
Bye.